In the previous video, we have touched on the topic of testing and automating this process in your CI/CD pipelines. This time we are going to look at tests a bit closer, starting with demystifying the two basic test types, unit tests and integration tests. We are also going to discuss creating body pipelines with these two test types in mind. First of all, let's look at unit tests. The word unit suggests that these tests work with small parts of the code. But how small exactly? The basic principle of unit testing is testing the smallest unit of code, a function, in complete isolation from other functions or dependencies to make sure that it does its job. Unit testing isolates each function as independent code blocks, allowing developers to test whether an individual function can perform what it is intended to do without affecting the rest of the code. This allows for faster bug detection and more efficient error fixes. With the correct setup and preparation, the unit tests are a quick and valuable way of making sure that the changes you introduce to the code work on their own and that they don't interfere with the existing functionality. Integration tests are on the other end of the complexity spectrum. As the name implies, they are designed to test the integration of several units that make up your app. Instead of testing individual functions as independent units, integration testing combines these units and tests them as a group. This type of testing allows developers to check whether individual app components can work together and produce the intended results. In simpler terms, integration tests are often set up to ensure that certain workflows within the app work the way they are intended to. This very often requires multiple smaller units to interact, communicate, or exchange data. As you can imagine, preparing, running, and maintaining such tests is a more demanding and time-consuming task than is the case with unit tests. The good news is that, in the spirit of DevOps, you can automate the entirety of test execution in your project, both unit and integration. Let's now switch to body and talk about setting up pipelines for these very different purposes. As unit tests are smaller and quicker to run, you can treat them as the first-line guard for your code quality. They will help you detect flaws in your code at an early stage. Don't take shortcuts when writing these tests. If you put in enough work, it's likely that you will be able to reuse your tests in other projects. You will want the unit tests to run as often as it's possible and reasonable, so let's set up a pipeline that will run the tests for every push to a feature branch I create in my project. I'm going to click the Create New Project button and add the repository of my app. Since I have already connected my GitHub profile to Body, I can see a list of all my repositories. All I have to do is choose the right one from the list. At this point, we are going to switch our sample app from the Docusarus portal to a simple counter app created with React. Now let's create the pipeline that's going to take care of the unit tests for my app. I'm going to name the pipeline and make it run on push. And using the advanced wildcard option, I'm going to set it up to run for all branches except the master branch. Now for the pipeline itself. I'm going to build the application with the first Node.js action. Then I am going to use another Node.js action to run the unit tests. That's it. I'm not going to deploy the application just yet. I would like to do that after the entire app is tested with integration tests. For convenience and transparency's sake, I'm going to use what we've learned in the previous lecture and add automatic notifications. I am going to add a Slack notification that goes out when the tests run successfully. In actions run on failure, I'm going to add a Slack action as well to inform the same channel, but additionally, I'm going to send out emails to a couple of addresses just to make sure that the right people get the news and inspect the reason of the failure ASAP. One more thing I'm going to do. At this point, I'm going to leave Body and switch over to my repository settings in GitHub. The Branches tab hosts a very useful feature, which is branch protection rules. Use it to protect any branch from unauthorized or untested commits. For our purpose, I'm going to add a new rule that's going to protect the project's main branch. I'm going to type main in branch name pattern to take care of that. Then I'm going to select the require status checks to pass before merging option. In GitHub lingo, status checks equals status reports from external services, such as reports of successful or failed pipeline executions coming from body. I select the pipeline with unit tests. For additional protection, I'm going to check the include administrators option. Let's make sure that no one abuses their power to merge untested changes. I think we can consider our first pipeline complete at this point. Let's set up the integration tests now. As integration tests are more complex, time and resource consuming, let's set them up to run a little bit less frequently and test only the changes that are already on the project's main branch, which means that they have been already verified by the unit tests. In body, you can set your pipeline to run recurrently with a very high degree of control. You can choose the simple mode for recurrence config, which allows you to set a start date and time intervals for pipeline runs, or go advanced and use Unix syntax for cron setup. For this showcase, I'm going to use the current date and time as the starting point, and I will have the pipeline run in 12-hour intervals. This will leave us with the integration tests running about twice a day, which should help ensure that our app does exactly what it's supposed to do. In a JavaScript setting, integration testing typically involves checking the external services and the server-side end of the app. You can use Mocha or Chai to write these tests. When you're done writing your tests, simply add a test command to execute them to your app's package.json, just like we did with the Docusaurus Node Markdown spell check. In terms of actions in the pipeline, add a Node.js action and have it install dependencies and run the tests. Similar to the integration tests pipeline, I'm going to add notification actions for transparency and proper spread of information among team members. Now that we have discussed notifications, testing, and automation, it's time to move on to the final topic of this course, application deployment.